I've been excited about Dying Light, the board game, since the moment Glass Cannon Unplugged announced that they were creating it well over a year to a year and a half ago. In fact, when they first put out the statement on social media, they released that little teaser plugs with the echoing sounds of zombie and apocalypse fading into the background. I put out a video talking about what I would expect or hope to see when bringing a video game into the tabletop space, especially a video game that I played all of the initial one. And while I'll admit I haven't had the time that I would like to play through the second one or any of the DLC content, I have watched quite a bit of other people playing through it. So I'm fairly familiar with this world, with this lore, and I've spent hours, dozens of hours exploring, jumping, parkouring, climbing over buildings, pushing my luck in the darkness, all to get that extra little bit of loot or accomplish that mission that, well, the game narrators made sure required you to end up at night. I've avoided night as much as possible, as well as anyone who has played this game certainly does. Dying Light is a game about survival. It's a game about threat. It's a game about overwhelming numbers, escalating risk, and scalable terrain. Something that you'd think can't really translate into the board game space very effectively. The campaign currently is on the last day of its runtime. I'll leave a link in the top of the video description over to the Kickstarter project. They have a lot of unlocked stretch goals because they've raised well over $1 million now with thousands and thousands of backers. Along with that, there is a lot of exclusive content and a ton of expansions released for this. One of the main reasons I'm filming this video with the final notice is to let you all know that if you don't back it here, there is a chance you will miss out on some of the stuff that they've been able to unlock, and some of the stuff that I think really plays a hand at translating what I loved in the video game here into the tabletop experience. Now, that's certainly not to say that if you don't have the money, you don't like doing Kickstarter, and you want to wait to see how the game is received by the wider community, there's certainly something to be said for that. However, if you want everything, if you love the IP, and you enjoy backing Kickstarter projects and following along as they develop, ask for your feedback, and continually put out assets for the community to playtest and give insight into how the game's coming along, then this is a project you'll probably want to be involved in. This is not a sponsored video, although we have worked closely with Glass Cannon in the past on some of their other projects. So please keep that in mind when analyzing my opinions, or at least the way that I'm addressing and talking about this project. I don't need you to back this. I don't even want you to back this, unless that one specific reason, unless you would enjoy it and love it. So this video is all to talk about how the video game is being translated into the board game experience, because for me, that's the thing I care the most about, and the thing that I think most tabletop gamers haven't spent the time to address. There's gameplay videos out there for the scenario that I have in front of me, and the scenario that you yourself can play already on TTS. There's rulebooks and teaching videos, and videos that walk you through what Dying Light the board game is doing as a board game. But when I think of Dying Light, and I think of the time that I spent exploring the districts and hallways and open cavities of this city, I really want to know, does this board game give me that same feeling and that same experience here in the tabletop setting? So I wrote down a few notes on what I think of when I think of Dying Light, and I want to try to analyze where this game does and doesn't, can and cannot implement some of the core mechanics that were important for me when it comes to the tabletop presence. Feel free, by the way, to leave comments down below. I'll do my best to keep up and respond to them, letting me know your thoughts. If anything, if you're unsure by the end of this video, pop into the Pledge Manager for at least $1, and you should be able to get access to some of those Kickstarter exclusives even after the campaign ends, as long as you're involved and have yet to complete your pledge on the project. So you could buy yourself a little bit more time if you're still on the fence. When I think of Dying Light and the time that I spent in this world, I think of course, Parkour. It was one of the games to kind of script and invent this multi-dimensional terrain scaling mechanic, right? Followed in the heels maybe of games like Assassin's Creed, but it did something wild and different. I think of Infamous when I think of the way that you can climb buildings and swing across street lights and jump on the back of trains, but Dying Light took it to a whole nother level. It was part of the fighting, jumping, running mechanics. It escalated as you played. The more you pushed, the more you leapt and dove, the more cinematic your experience would be, the more your skills rose, and the more powerful you were when dealing with and manipulating the mobs on the tabletop. When I think of Dying Light, I think of not only parkour, but also the overwhelming infestation that exists in the city. You can't kill all the mobs. Yet during the day, you can run around and harvest a few resources from them, but the reality is, Dying Light's not about overcoming the sickness. Not really at the heart of it. It's about surviving and dealing with and doing your best to just kind of skirt around the edges of what is now society. However gruesome and unsociable that society is. So, when I think of a board game, I need that terrain. I need to be able to scale, jump, leap, and feel like I'm investing myself in the dynamic infrastructure of the city I'm playing with. I also want to feel like the world around me is overwhelmed. We'll get to that in a moment. I also think of the quests that I went on when addressing Dying Light. The quests that pushed me in different ways and an open world to explore. I don't want to be on some scripted narrative where I do A, B, and C, and that's kind of the consequence of my actions. For the most part, Dying Light gave me a core story to follow and then a lot of other little adventures and outskirts to go on. And it allowed me to approach the quests that I was going to solve in a variety of ways. Do I want to tackle them primarily during the day, making them a little bit easier? Do I want to set up traps and get myself positioned, sniping and killing off all the zombies in one controlled zone before actually stepping down and finishing or turning on the generator or powering up the lights or doing whatever else it is that you're doing, rescuing the survivor, healing the sick, saving, I don't know, I was going to say saving a dog. I don't think you save dogs in this. I think they just mostly tried to devour you. Either way, you could approach the quests that you're going after in a variety of ways, especially due to the terrain that you had. You could jump up into the top of the roof and find an entrance in. You could skirt around the sides or pop in various different entrances and exits to really control how you wanted and how your skill sets were catered towards dealing with the threat on the ground. I also think of course, the day and night cycle, that ebb and flow between a peaceful, fairly controllable and manageable world, a daytime where everything's kind of okay. As long as you're quick enough, fast enough, and have the skill level to be dealing with the region that you're dealing with, you probably won't get in too much trouble. But if you stay out too late, and you start getting the virals, the volatiles, you start getting these more beefy creatures, it's terrifying. I remember the first time I played, like, you have that night shift, and then suddenly you're running, sprinting down alleyways, leaping over fences, climbing up buildings, doing anything to escape from this demon that's hunting you from the back. I want Dying Light, the board game, to do the same thing. During the day, I should be able to accomplish tasks and move around the terrain, but as we push closer and closer to evening, through this day and night tracker over here, it should become more threatening. There should be an ebb and flow. I should be scared of being out here at night, and I should be, honestly, kind of unable to manage the escalating violence and the escalating danger that I'm being confronted with. Sure, I might be able to mitigate it in some ways, toss a stun grenade, pop into a zone that has some lights on, things like that to control for it, but never be free from it. I also think of gear and skills. I think of the way that I was able to equip my player, right? I mean, a big part of this game is searching, hunting, and finding resources while you play. It's about discovering and upgrading different items that you have and learning how to use them to the best of your capabilities. You know, you get the ability to leap off a cliff and kick a zombie in the face. You get a brand new hatchet or axe that allows you to slash through mobs in the most gruesome fashion, and yet everything you have still can't tackle the beasts that are hunting you in the dark. So, that's what I think about when I think about Dying Light, the video game. Let's break each one of those categories down, now talking about how the board game's implementing and not implementing some of these features to give you a better sense of what it's going to be like to play. First off, parkour. A pretty obvious approach in this game is to create scalable buildings, and I think Glass Cannon has actually done this in a very responsible and actually pretty creative way. Now, of course, they can't get to the nuanced degree of parkour that the original video game has. It's almost impossible to replicate that type of system here on the game board, but there are a variety of things they're doing that provide you with that feeling of moving up and down terrain, taking risks to leap across chasms and buildings, and leveling up skills or utilizing certain abilities that give you more flexibility around the terrain. You could run across the streets, pushing, battling, and shoving your way through, but if you decide to scale, which most people will, you'll be using your dice. It's a dice drafting system or a dice allocation system where you're going to be rolling a set of dice that you have, and then deciding how you want to use those abilities depending on the icons and symbols that pop up, and depending on the terrain that you have. It's going to cost you additional movement to scale up buildings depending on the level of those buildings, 1s, 2s, and 3s. And along with that, you're going to be able to leap across chasms as well, taking a little bit more of a risk. You could mitigate that with an extra die, or you could roll a danger die in association with that. That might spawn more mobs, might cause more awareness of your presence on the board, causing people to move towards you, or just making the terrain underneath you a little bit more threatening. During the day, the roofs are fairly safe. That's one of the things that I actually think the board game has done well. There is a approachable way, yet risky way, to move around the terrain when all you're dealing with are the basic biters here on the table. You can pop down and deal with 1 or 2 of them yourselves. You can push some out of your zone. You can drop a grenade, whatever skills you have to utilize. And then you can hop up onto the top of the building, and you're pretty much in a good spot. As long as you're living up here during the day, you're in a good position to look over the vast landscape and decide what your next turn is going to be. On top of that, you have a variety of special skills and abilities, like safe landing, firm grip, and perfect dodge. These are just a few that I have here in the prototype, but in the final game, I am sure they're going to enhance your feeling of parkour through abilities like this. Like, I can reroll 1 risk die when jumping, so I have an advantage on jumping. I get 1 evasion to each climb action, so I get to avoid rolling that risk die just because I'm going up a hill. And while defending, evasion boosters are worth +1 defense. Finally, I have cards like Air Kick. After jump, you can make a fast attack for free. These give you a feeling of momentum, a feeling of utilizing terrain in a way that allows you to more effectively deal with mobs around the board. And I think it does the parkour pretty darn well, to be honest. Again, you can't get to the same nuanced degree of scalability that the final game has, but I have enjoyed hopping up buildings and not really feeling like running around the streets is the best thing, while still the game becomes more challenging and more risky the more you're utilizing your skills. And, at the same time, more fun. Very similar to the video game in that sense. I am curious to see if they do any internal versions of this game scenario. If you have any where you enter an office building or a hospital, and how they replicate the claustrophobia of having abilities that are really good at parkour in spaces that really don't cater to parkour abilities. Or even sticking you in a giant open field with 1 building here and maybe a train road going through the center. I'm very curious to see how Glass Cannon approaches some of the other challenges that were presented in this game when you find that the skills that you've developed, both as a player and as a player character, don't apply to the environment you're in anymore. Parkour, for me, I think is as close as a board game has come to giving me that feeling. I won't know until I see all of the abilities and I see how the new maps and the new quests develop, but I have a lot of confidence that they'll be able to play with this system and keep it fresh, exciting, and new, while still being simple enough that you can run it. Let's talk about the day and night cycle, probably the other most salient thing here when it comes to the board game experience. You'll have a tracker here, a round tracker, and depending on where you start, the scenario we have starts you already here on 6 or 7, moving you into the darkness phase immediately after taking your first turn, and things escalate very, very quickly. During the day, you feel like you can control the board. I can walk around the streets and pretty much be all right. I get to choose how the players go in turn order. I get to choose who goes first and when they move and how they move around the board, meaning that whatever objectives we're going for, or items that we want to gather from around the board, or mobs we want to defeat while teaming up together, because it is a 1 to 4 player cooperative campaign game, we can do that. The day gives you as much choice as possible, as much as you really could want. The night shifts that. The night moves it to a cycle where a set of cards are going to be drafting your turn order, your sequence of play, and these cards will script if you go or the enemies go. If they activate early and fast, pouncing on you and sneaking up to you from behind, spawning more mobs and so on and so forth, or if you're going to be able to continue progressing with your mission before they become a salient threat. That little bit of taking away agency from you, the player, really does make that day and night cycle start to feel more threatening and a little bit more randomized, as if the AI has slightly more control than you're comfortable giving it. Along with that, every player is going to have this set of awareness cards, I believe is what they're called. These cards are going to be the things that get drawn after you take your turn. Depending on how many dice you play and how far you've pushed your momentum, you will be drawing the attention of mobs around the board. Now, these could be good or bad, and there's a core 8 of them at the moment in this prototype deck. These could involve things like spawning new mobs, depending on the cycle that you're in, moving them towards you. At the end of the exposure phase, you could get 1 free push. You have good night, you have good luck. Virals activate within a range of 2 of you, meaning they're going to be hunting you down. And you have cards like Sunlight Advantage. At the end of the exposure phase, you may move 1 for free. They give you some bonuses, while still giving the AI a little bit of actions and utility on the game board. If you've noticed, they have a day and night symbol on the back of them. This also changes. When you shift from day to night, these cards become more punishing. They become more dramatic and more effective, and I'm hoping, as this game campaign continues, to see this deck continue to develop. I'd love to see consequences of actions and campaign storylines that we've initiated mix into our consequence deck. I'd love to see either some positive effects of the abilities, skills, and things we've unlocked as we've played, kind of reflecting having a home base and a camp full of people who are survivors because you've been there, contrasted with a deeper, darker, more crucial threat happening on the game state when you shift into that night phase, because you've been disturbing the peace. You've been pushing your luck a little bit too far. So the day and night cycle, I think, works very well here. You never feel like you have complete control of the map board, which is something very important for Dying Light versus something like Zombicide, for instance, another very popular zombie-based game where you're the heroes. You're playing an RPG game or a D&D game. You're rushing through, casting spells, slashing swords, and wiping out hordes and hordes of zombies. This is not what this game is about. This game focuses on making you always feel like you don't have control of the game map, like you're trying to make it to your objective, and trying to make crucial decisions about how you approach that objective, and where and when you decide to take a detour to pick up secret items, bonus gear, or potentially a side quest, because they do pop up from time to time on the game board. That brings me to the next point that I want to talk about, the way that you actually approach completing a story objective. Now, of course, we only have our core prototype scenario here. You can watch a full gameplay of that. I recommend watching the Brothers Murph, by the way. They did an excellent job at not only having fun, but also showing how the gameplay flow and the storyline progresses. Really good 2-player game. However, this storyline provides you with a few different narrative cues. You're going to be going and turning on some base generators, you're going to be going to a drop zone, and then you're going to be moving towards an exit, trying to get to a base. Pretty straightforward, pretty standard Dying Light style campaign notes. It doesn't give me a big sense or a deep sense of what the overarching story will be for this, if we're going to mirror the Dying Light, the video game campaign, or if Glass Cannon's going to be mixing in their own storyline and their own story arc into the narrative choice here. I honestly would be okay with either, as long as it doesn't feel too derivative of the original. I don't want to play the exact same story, but I don't mind if some of the tropes, like, continually having to deal with power, turn on lights, deal with generators, and rescue people, are common themes throughout the experience of the game. The quests, however, give you a lot of opportunity to interact with them in different ways. You could scale across buildings, hop down onto the ground to pick up resources as you go, push zombies over into fire, team up together to accomplish missions in one single zone, or split up while one person goes and collects gear and loot from across the board, another person focuses on holding back the zombies and unlocking the different quest objectives specifically. The writing so far has been enjoyable and intriguing, while not overwhelmingly unique. It feels like Dying Light. It feels accurate to the lore and accurate to the gameplay, and I've enjoyed dipping my foot back into this game that I loved so much back in the day. I would like to see more opportunities for multi-quests happening at the same time, side quests happening in the same board where you're choosing maybe one of two pathways, and potentially, depending on your actions during the course of the game or how long you take harvesting riches from the daytime, you might get pushed in one or another direction because you just don't have another good viable choice. I would love to see the consequence of some of the actions we take on the game board result in campaign narrative flow shifting. I think that's likely to happen based on how open and expansive this world feels, but I'm not entirely sure, again, because I haven't been able to play through or see a farther developed version of the game. Right now, I think they give you a lot of opportunities for how you deal with and solve each unique puzzle, and I think the way that you approach each of those puzzles feels rewarding. You will find a lot of resources across the map, and a lot of resources in various different locations that you might not naturally go to. This provides you with the opportunity to detour slightly, even here in this prototype base level scenario. I found myself wanting to go hunt out some additional items from any of these decks. We've got Cricket Stick, Raggedy Chopper, Meat Bait, Stamina Booster, Molotov Cocktail, Syringe, and then some of our purple chests here, our purple backpacks. We have a Glaive, a Proletarian, a Rage Booster, a Military Medkit, a DIY Grenade, a UV Flare, and Inhibitors. These really do change the way that you approach the scenario that you're facing when you pick them up and find them. So detouring for a purple backpack is oftentimes, potentially, worth the investment. Of course, as long as you do it safely and responsibly, and you don't stumble too close to the darkness, which this prototype throws you into immediately, so detouring to every location to pick up every item just isn't possible. Along with that, there's some cool terrain options and abilities that you have, like fire spread around here, spawn zones, backpacks that you can interact with, but also things like launch pads, where you'll be able to land on a location and spring forward a few spaces in any number of directions. I like the flexibility that that provides to the game board, and it really feels like it opens up the space even more to your characters that are supposed to be high-flying, acrobatic geniuses. I've already kind of talked about gear and skills. You have your base level gear across here, your general protective items. You also have the gear that you can find, or the resources you can find when you explore each scenario. And you have your own unique customizable skills. I'm really hoping and expecting to see those skill trees and the resources and items that you can get and upgrade expand as you play through your campaign. It's a campaign game, so the natural assumption is that is what will happen. I don't think the tech tree is going to be as deep as Dying Light the video game. Again, it's very hard to replicate something like that in a board game system. However, I think the way that they've done it so far, how approachable, easily playable, and easily to set up this game is, says a lot to where they can go with customization. If the game state here is easy to run, if it's not too complex to move the mob, set up the buildings, and prepare your character, you can have some really cool special abilities or some weapons that have some chaining effects that multiply and make you feel overpowered or broken for a chapter or two. Because your board is probably going to be the most complex thing happening in the game state. Glass Cannon's paid a lot of attention to how this game works, how easy it is to play, all the way down to the way these buildings are actually constructed. Heavy-duty cardboard with artwork on each side that just kind of slots and slides together. Allows you to change up the theme of the game. Each building feels and looks unique, and they're extremely sturdy while providing a little bit of a ridge to keep you from knocking your player characters off when you have a handful of mobs that you moved up there to the top. I think this was a really good decision by them, and I don't know that I've seen terrain built out this way in other games. Correct me if I'm wrong. I understand that cardboard foldouts are not unique, but this is really sturdy and doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart with multiple breakdowns and setups. I like it a lot more than cardboard, stick-together terrain. I like it more than the paper-style fold-out with like a flap that goes on top. And I don't even mind breaking this down and resetting this up when it's time, which means all of this can store away fairly easily. I think all these buildings took me about 10 minutes to put together and then place out onto the table, and maybe about 20 to 30 minutes to set up. So the playtime will take a little bit to get going, but then you're ready to run a few scenarios, and everything's already constructed for you. The final thing that I want to analyze when talking about the video game to the board game experience is the level of challenge that I think needs to exist here on the game board. There's a lot. Even this initial scenario has some very possible fail conditions in it. You might get to the very end and be one or two turns away, but the threat level here is significant. Your players will die and you'll lose whatever chapter you're playing if one of you gets 4 critical wound cards. That's not that much, especially during the night phase, where you might have a few of these different mobs hop into your location and deal 3, 4, or 5 damage in one fell swoop, making you draw and then reveal various different cards. Now, the critical wound cards are actually pretty cool. Some of them have positive effects, some of them have negative effects, and all of them move you one step closer to death. They might give you a chance to respond with an attack. They might allow you to move out of an area that you just got hit with, or shove a zombie back to keep them from attacking you again immediately on the next cycle. But it's never easy. You're always in danger. And that danger ramps up extremely fast as you move into the night. I think that's my general thoughts and overview of this game. I like, really, the dice rolling and dice drafting system. It gives you a bit of agency over manipulating and choosing what you want to use, but it also provides you with a pretty significant pressure luck mechanic, depending on how many danger dice and exposure you actually want to reveal during your turn. You certainly have the opportunity to be a player character that moves around slowly, snipes, and takes your time to accomplish your quests, or you can barrel your way through, trying your best to overcome and complete objectives quickly so that you avoid getting into that more threatening stage of the game with a few things left to accomplish. I think the game paces itself well. I think it's set up and designed very well, and I think it's very, very easy and accessible to play. If you're still on the fence, I really do suggest you hop over to the TTS and give this a play there. Of course, a video game TTS, Tabletop Simulator experience, will not be the same as playing it in person, but you'll get a little bit of the sense of how the gameplay flow works and what the experience might be like. The last thing I can say is Glass Cannon has a track record so far of implementing and translating video game IPs into the board game space very, very well. With their initial collaboration actually being on The Last of Us, with their initial collaboration being on, completely blanking right now. No, it is The Last of Us. No, it's not The Last of Us. I can't believe I'm completely blanking. The Shelter game. I literally have it right here in the other room. It's too early in the morning, I think, is the consequence of this. But they've put out a game called Frostpunk. They translated that into a board game state, which maintained the complexity and the crushing difficulty of the game while still giving you a very, very video game experience. The prototype copies of Apex Legends that we played really did implement and give you the experience of playing some elements of Apex Legends. Of course, an MMO is a hard thing to translate into a tabletop experience. And they were also involved in the very first game that Awakened Realms put out, which again, it's not called... Maybe it is called The Last of Us. I'm too early to be confident on the name. But you can look it up. And that game was brought to the public with great renown. It kind of started out what Awaken Realms has become, and then the collaborators that worked on that as well have now moved over, some of them, to start their own publishing firm here with Glass Cannon. I'm excited to see what else they produce. I'm excited to see you all get this into your hands, and personally, I'm really excited to see the expansions get integrated, to have all that, cool unlocked content that this campaign has generated, and actually start playing through the full campaign as soon as they can get a copy into my hands. I'm hoping, maybe I can talk them into letting me experiment with a pre-production copy sometime before the actual wave delivers. Either way, this is cool. This has been fun to dive into. It's neat to re-explore an IP that I loved years ago in a new application, in a new setting, and see a publisher that I think has taken the IP very seriously and taking the fan base that they're going to be bringing over into the board game hobby with a lot of respect. So, follow that link down below. They've got about 8 hours left. If you're not entirely convinced, I do recommend you get into the Pledge Manager, because you'll still be able to get access to a lot of those Kickstarter exclusive limited time items that they have unlocked due to the nature of crowdfunding campaigns. Either way, thank you for watching, thank you for being here. Whatever the case, though, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing. If you want to tell someone the name of a game you're going to reference, have it written down before trying to come up with it. Or go over to the campaign and back a sword for yourself. This is a official replica prop piece that they are making available not only to content creators, but literally to you. So, yeah, get yourself a replica Dying Light blade, a copy of at least the base game, and have yourself a good old time. I guess my final note that I think I probably said, but I'm going to reiterate, is that in the realm of campaign genre games, especially zombie-based or mob-based campaign games, Dying Light stands out so far. I don't know of another game that makes you feel like you can't control the state of the board. Like you're moving, diving, hiding, and doing your very best to manage what little room you need. And that's also what the video game did so well. So, my final verdict when thinking about and talking about the prototype copy that I have at the moment is that they've done a pretty darn good job. And I'm excited to see what else they bring in the future. Please remember, this is not a sponsored video, but we have worked very closely with Glass Cannon in the past. So keep that in mind when weighing your decision. Either way, we'll see you later.